This time, on An Architect's Perspective, I sit down with Professor Per Olaf to explore the Storhamar Barn, one of the most influential buildings of the 20th century. Built within the ruins of a medieval barn, Fehn's design balances modern intervention with deep respect for history, material, and time. We discuss Fehn's philosophy, his relationship to Louis Kahn, and how this building continues to reshape thinking around conservation and contemporary design. Let's take a listen. Per, before we begin discussing this wonderful building, can you just start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
First of all, thank you for your interest in Sverre Fehn, and thank you for the invitation. I was born in a small town close to the Swedish border. When I was finished with service for 2 years, I applied for Washington State to study architecture. And that was fantastic time. It was 5 years study then.
And was it at this time that you bumped into Louis Kahn, taught by him?
Yes, it was not so easy as that, because it was very difficult to enter that school or to enter that course.
The course that Kahn was teaching?
Yes. So I made a portfolio and sent the portfolio.
And what year roughly was this?
This was 71.
71. And this was a separate university, wasn't it?
The University of Penn in Philadelphia.
Yeah. So you'd finished your time in Washington.
Yes.
And moved up to Penn.
Right.
He accepted your portfolio.
Yes.
And how many months or years were you studying with Kahn?
Well, it was about a 2-year period.
2 years.
So we were the last class that had him full-time. He died in the class after. Oh, wow. So we were very fortunate in that sense.
Indeed you were.
And we were 16 to 18 kids all over the world.
Ranging from what age?
20 to 40.
And just out of interest, what did a week look like for you in terms of studying under the great man? What hours and lectures would he have during the week?
Well, it was a day and night course. Right. We worked day and night.
Yeah.
Kahn was with her 2 or 3 times a week. Either he had a small lecture. We had to have a pin-up every other day. He was part of that critique.
Right.
And we have table one-to-one discussion with him. That was a very energetic time.
Yeah.
Very special in so many ways.
I'm sure. So there you were in Pennsylvania working night and day for Kahn.
Right.
When you look at the buildings that Kahn produced and the time frame he produced it, he was incredibly efficient.
Yes.
Produced some of the most amazing buildings of our time in such a short period of his own life. And maybe that contributed somewhat to his downfall, potentially. But he was an amazingly efficient architect with the level of buildings he was producing right across the world.
Of course, his life was architecture in a way.
Yes.
His concentration and ability to sort of focus on what he was doing. And first of all, the belief in architecture.
In what sense?
Well, the importance of architecture.
The power to transform and inspire?
Well, the power of the space itself. And that architecture seen as extremely important for human. He even stated that good architecture has the capacity to further develop our humanness.
Interesting.
And so they were fantastic years.
So what came across as his biggest inspiration then?
His biggest inspiration as a student was his way to inspire towards the unknown, to wonder what it could be.
Right.
To never take the answer that is today as the beginning, but rather search for a new beginning.
Right. It's funny because one of the things that I take away from Kahn is, as Plasma, the great philosopher, architectural philosopher and historian, speaks about the reverberation he has with history and how ancient monuments, particularly the Greek monuments of which he painted and drew, was so inspirational for his work.
Right.
And so that's something that I think drove him. The quality of light in some of those monuments, I think, were of inspiration to him. But I was just wondering if any of that came through in his teachings.
Yeah, all that came through in his teaching, but maybe in a different way than one think. It was all always based sort of on a social consciousness. It was based on sort of where human stands inside that. What could be collective in architecture? What could be understood by everyone? What was architectural capacity to reach some sort of a spatial commonness?
Right. Yeah.
In which then he called the architecture of the institution,
Yeah.
meaning that it's common for everyone and sensed by everyone in a sense. Right.
I mean, you said you were lucky because you had the 2 full years with him. He passed away the following year.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, arguably, you may have ended up working for him had he not passed away. You know, usually that's the trajectory for a lot of students that are taught by masters to eventually end up working for them.
Well, he asked me.
Oh, did he?
Whether I would like to work.
Did he mention the building?
No.
No, just generally.
But I gave for many, a very strange answer on that. And I said, Mr. Kahn, we have had some fantastic time together. And I don't want that to disappear. I don't want to ruin that clarity.
Okay.
So I said no.
Would you say that was the wise decision?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Because it's then I had the capacity to make my own puzzle.
Yeah.
What this all was about.
Right.
And in that puzzle came, of course, Fehn.
So your time with Kahn was coming to a natural end. What was the next calling?
Well, I had old parents then. So I felt it was important to come home and see my parents.
Okay. And so you came home to Oslo.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about your thinking of how life was going to play out for you. What were the ambitions?
Of course, the idea then was to get a job. It was just one place in the end that I really would like to work, and that was with Sverre Fehn.
And his office was in Oslo.
And his office was in Oslo, in a house there that was also where they lived. And there were 3 guys working there then. So it was part of his home, but it was an office too.
Yeah, home office. And so can you just take us back to how you actually met Fehn? You mentioned you sent a letter or something, or you met him through other architects. Can you describe how that occurred and what your takeaways were when you first actually met him?
I went up to his office, up the stairs to the 2nd floor, and there he sat by his desk. He welcomed me. He was a very generous man, full of charm and full of personality, in which then you sense immediately sort of his personal power, to put it that way.
His charisma?
Yes, very much so.
Charismatic?
Yeah, very much so. And he was tall, right? He was, at the same time, very, very gentle, very curious about things. So when he first hired me, one of the first things we did was to go to Bøhler Samfunnshus that he has just finished. And I think that was a testing ground, whether I should stay in the office or not, what I felt about that. And this was just finished. And I got very excited about the place. And I said to him immediately, then we had not been together for a long time, said, this work of yours has to come out. This has to have a larger audience than it has now.
And what's his response?
Yes, he sort of agreed. He was not a man that elaborated on these things.
Yeah.
Because the responsibility was in my sentence. At the same time, he was very positive about it. So after a couple of days, I got a phone call and he said yes. And then another fantastic chapter started that went through, 30 or 40 years until he died.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you wanted to work for him and what drew you towards his theory and philosophies.
Well, I would say it was very much an extension of the work or the thinking that I had been introduced by Kahn. And I was fascinated by the way he spoke on architecture. And again, also his belief in architecture, his storytelling related to what could be the content for a work. But I must honestly say, without having the background of Louis Kahn and have experienced him and the way he talked and the way he approached an architectural position, I would have not been able to connect with him the way I actually have done. So it was Kahn that sort of serves as a base for that. And therefore, I never was a student of Sverre Fehn. I never really became sort of an assistant of Sverre Fehn. Our relationship was sort of as a talking partners in a way.
You're colleagues at the
to a certain degree.
But I think it's important to reflect on, there are people like yourself throughout history that almost transfer ideas and philosophy from two different great architects. And I think you're lucky enough to be in that position where you've taken Kahn and brought it back to Norway to a person that's deeply embedded and fixated with the ideas of the person you were taught by. And that for me is very fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's been very rewarding. And all my life I have taken notes. I took all the notes of Louis Kahn in class there. I took all the notes of the conversations sort of I had with Sverre, all the notes for his lectures. And when I go through them now, because I go through them once more, because there are certain things that I'm after, I'm amazed sort of the precision in his language and how deep thinking it is in relation to architecture. That is so easy to pass. That is so easy to call poetry. That is so easy to not to have an awareness of sort of what he's searching for in that. So his turns to me, the more I go back to this material, I see his capacity as an architectural thinker very strongly.
It's beautiful that you've got those notes and you can go back, and it kind of reminds me of that wonderful expression that I use with my students. When the student is ready, the teacher will emerge. When the student is truly ready, the teacher will disappear. And in a way, you emerged as a student from Kahn, he disappeared from your life, and you went on back to Norway and started your own journey, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
You mentioned that you were never really a student of Fehn, but you worked as a colleague alongside him. What were your biggest takeaways from teaching and working with him?
One thing is the concentration on work, the concentration of having an idea or bringing forward an idea, and constantly then in search of what that idea can mean spatially, meaning architecturally. That one never hesitate of the importance of that thought in a way, when it's first there. That's what he called a room picture, this image then that drive him, and the trust then in that image or that creative thought has the capacity to bring an architecture out physically in which he's driving for. Right?
And were you able, or were any of your colleagues that worked with him able to question this room idea, how valid it was, or was it a sort of, if you don't like my idea, you're out the door?
Oh no, it was complete collaboration, but his idea was his, but every day was a constant test, and we were the testers.
Right.
In that sense.
Okay.
Right. That's what I mean with concentration, to hold on what you believe in that sense.
Interesting. And how long did you actually work for him?
I worked in the office. I worked for him for 2 years, but then he asked me to teach, and we taught then together for 30 years.
And now you're full-time teaching?
No, I started my own office. So I was part-time teaching.
In his office, and then he said, would you like to come and teach? And you left the architectural practice at that stage and started your own, is that right?
Yeah, but there were reasons for it, because there were no work. And due to circumstances in relation to one building, the School for Death, which was very negative in the papers related to his work, that sort of set him back for about almost 10 years.
The article that you mentioned that was so damning about the building for deaf, can you expand on that at all?
Sure. In one of the most important commercial news, Oslo newspaper, was on the first page, concrete hell for children. And the argument was that it was just the architecture that was in focus and not the children. Fehn was striving for the absolute opposite. He was striving for the milieu that the deaf, the person that could not hear well, he was striving for spaces that had the capacity in which that reading could occur also visually. So it really turned out into a mess that put him aside for 10 years.
Was there any criticism that you would deem to be a fair reflection, or was it just completely ill-considered, poorly researched, headline-grabbing article?
I would say the last.
It's incredible to think that after the completion of that school for deaf and one article set such a significant figure of the 20th century of architecture back by such a period of time.
Yeah, this story goes back and forth, but you have to remember it's a very small country.
Yes.
And he had a very small practice.
Yeah.
So he had very little to go on in relation to that, though he was a very famous architect at that point.
He closed the office, or?
No. He had one person that had been there for a long time, being part of it still. Yeah. And there were small jobs now and then, but not really any work per se.
Right.
He had more time than to his teaching, which he took very seriously. He went to school almost every day at noon or no later than 1 o'clock and stayed there to 4 or something like that, and then went back to the office. But it was also a time maybe that he matured in a certain way, or he continued to mature in a certain way that also then made it possible for do the work that then finally came to him.
Interesting. So without that, maybe we wouldn't see some of the buildings in the way we do. It was a time for reflection and realignment.
I think that is true.
So Per, I think it's a good opportunity to now think about the building where we are today, the museum. I'd just like to touch upon how this came about as a commission for Fehn.
He was asked by actually an old student of him that was, I believe, a director of the museum at the time, whether he was interested by his board, discussed by the board, he was interested in taking on such a commission.
One of his students.
Right.
And this was a museum already?
Sort of.
Because of the medieval route?
Or the intention of
right. Visitors were coming here.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Sverre Fehn said, well, that sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. And I guess it started from there, and then it's developed into a contract.
And roughly what year was that?
1967.
Per, for people that can't actually see the building as we look at it here today, could you just summarize the philosophical stance and the conceptual ideas that Fehn would have been considering before he started this museum?
Well, it's 3 wings. The north wing, that belongs to the Folk Museum, the west wing to Middle Ages, and the south wing that has the auditorium. Though everything was more or less a ruin, but this was sort of the base for the start.
This was the
project.
The medieval part.
Right.
13th century.
And the barn part.
Somewhere between the 11th and 12th century, some of the ruins.
Right.
And the barn was...
Later.
Yeah.
But the barn also had gone through different transformation changes.
Yeah. And for those people that are not familiar with the building, we do have a very interesting cathedral ruin on the northwest side, which is now covered in glass, known as the Glass Cathedral. So the context is rich and complex.
Very much so. And the more one read about it, the more one is here, one understands the complexity of these many transformation that has gone on for centuries. And I think that fascination of the complexity of so many time layers working on each other at the same time, that was a challenge that Sverre Fehn was very much after in a way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a project that really fits his ability to be as creative as possible.
Yeah. But you mentioned the time layers, and this is something that I think Fehn dealt with very successfully here. But maybe you could just expand on what that means.
Yeah, if we first go back to the main idea of the museum itself, to have respect for the ruin, whatever ruin it was, particularly the Middle Ages, to have a museum that was active, meaning that the digging for new objects inside the building could occur, and of course that it was feasible to take on the objects or some of the objects that were already found there. And in relation to the time layer, it meant different periods in which sort of each structure has made their traces. So one structure has that trace which explored that time layer. On top of that is another structure that has another time inside it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we would all agree now, looking at Fehn's intervention, is that he's taken all of those and almost very successfully frozen that moment of time with his intervention. And that marriage between the ancient and now Fehn's intervention is very, very successful and creates this architectural narrative that I believe has transformed building conservation philosophy globally.
It's a very unique museum in that sense. It's truly one of its time. And I think one of the things that has made it successful, or that has made it a thinking instrument for many museums, is sort of this refinement of the different structures that belong then to the different tile layers that we have talked about. And in that there is a clarity. There is not a mixture of the stone wall with the concrete wall, or the concrete wall with the wooden structure. Each of them has a clarity within their own.
Yes.
So inside of that, there is very much sort of an honesty. It's the clarity of what things are, and you have to make the story, or you have to continue to make the story yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the reasons why this building is such a seminal building is because of the expression you use. It's seen as a thinking instrument. It's seen as a way to understand how you weave these layers of different materials, different ages together to create one unique and fresh experience, ensemble, whatever it may be. And we can see this building influencing conservation philosophy arguably across the world, which is fascinating.
Inside the building was also certain architectural topic that was essential for him also afterwards was invented. One was the architectural horizon, right?
Tell us more.
Where do you place, he stated his question, where do you place people between heaven and earth? And he said, to decide that, how far I lift you up from the ground is a very critical architectural issue. And he called wherever you lift it, he called that an architectural horizon. So inside of these, there are many architectural horizons in which then you are lifted from the ground and up and into a position in which then past and present is confronting each other anew.
Yes. I mean, I always like to think about what buildings influenced this building and what buildings since this building was completed do you see this influencing? So two that comes to mind would be the Guggenheim by Frank Gehry, which happened well before this building, and then maybe some of the work of Richard Meyer in his museums. both of those examples have ramps. Can you speak about the influences, past and present, that this museum's had on other architects?
Oh, I think it's have had an influence on architects worldwide in many different ways. He knew Gary.
Yes.
He knew Mary. And they met and they talked.
Yes.
But I can't say whether their ramp come from this building. I have no idea of saying, but I will talk about it in the following way. If you have been here and not just seen the drawings and not just seen the pictures, but if you actually have confronted the place with your body, that your body has been part of it, I think it's very difficult not to influence you architecturally,
Yeah.
And of course, then you have seen the ramp, you have seen many things. What you then take with you as an architect, it goes all up to you. But you can't stay neutral for the place. It have given you something architecturally that I don't feel you can escape as an architect.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think in more modern museums or more recent museums that have been completed, there's always a question of where does the museum finish and the exhibits begin? Arguably, the Guggenheim by Frank Gehry in Bilbao may be an example of that, where almost you visit the building and it works, or there's enough there to ponder without any exhibits, relics, or artifacts. How do you see that idea working within this building?
I would say in almost all of Sverre Fehn's work, including the villas actually, there is an almost intense relationship between the object and the space. They cannot really be separated. The same here. These artifacts belongs to here in a way. And when we went through the museum this morning, I think we felt that though the simplest form of folk object, daily object, suddenly sort of states a meaning, suddenly states an important, because it's not foreign to the place, and strengthen then the identity of the place itself.
You could conclude that when looking at the everyday objects, be it a scythe, be it some sort of child's toy or whatever it might be, what's quite interesting here, as in Scarpa's work, is the mount, is the support, is how it's exhibited. What does it say about Fehn's philosophy on how we look at objects and how objects are exhibited and such like?
I think it's a very important question because it's a key actually in Fehn's work in general. When you look at his Brussels pavilion from 1958, the object and the placement of the object was already then essential, in which he felt that each object should have its own light. And he was searching for that light in different ways, again, due to structure.
Yeah.
At the same time, he believed that, and these are his sentences, he believed that every object is sort of alive. Inside an object, it was not neutral for him, but had an existential value. We wrote about that in Perspective Journal now many years ago with the title Has a Dull Life. So his respect for the object was very strong.
Yeah.
Because in this display, it was important for him again that the object had one voice, and he didn't want to ruin that voice that each object has. But he wanted to add a story to the object. Like, for example, the slates going into heaven, right? He wanted to add a story to the object.
And for those people that don't really know the way he's exhibited the sleigh, it's a sleigh that you take to church on Sunday,
Right.
and there's a number of them lined up horizontally, and the last one is pointing upwards, arguably to heaven or
They
some
go
other.
to heaven. But again, it was, he says a sentence, as this is his sentence, I will try to remember. I don't want to destroy the things that are already destroyed. In other words, he don't want to repair the object. The most simple example for that is the openness in the ruin that he does not repair, right? Into an arch or into a window, right? He let it stay as it is, right? But in order then to bring that story into a dialogue, it needs a partner. And the partner is the present. Partner in this sense is the concrete, is the columns, is the glass, right? It starts a communication, which then gives the past a way to talk through the present. And we also go sharp on it and say, no, I don't want to make it into a symbol. I don't want to, make it nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In that conversation between the story and the object, it's also the brutality of facing past and present.
Yes. Interesting. And in walking around the museum and looking at the exhibits, normally you're confronted with quite a bit of text about each object. But here, for whatever reason, it's very, very minimal. Was that something Fehn wanted for the exhibits?
Oh, it was crucial for him. He didn't want sort of the story of the object to be read as a book. Again, it was a confrontation with the object that you had to make your own story into it. That was the key for him. Mm-hmm. To wonder what it is, what is have done, what is the life of that object. Yeah. And you have to intervene with that in your own thinking. Mm-hmm. Of course, the criticize of that has been done by many. Yeah. Because it's not felt as academic enough. Mm-hmm. So that has been a struggle to accept that. And I think this museum has been very strong, though there have been many internal discussions on this, that's probably still going on. But to hold on to his idea, which then makes it one of the masterpieces in the world related to this pure relationship between the person and the object.
Right. And was he inspired at all by the art world in this philosophical position? I suppose one thinks about Duchamp and the way the urinal was displayed and the significance of the setting to understand the urinal in a different manner. Mm. Do you think the art world was influential to Fehn?
Everything was influenced by him. He was very much, of course, into the art world. He was into the music world. He was into the poetic world. Right. And he was very much into the movie world. He saw cowboy movies. He tried to see a cowboy movie every day, to put it that way, if it was possible. That was just a way of triggering his own stories, right? Yeah. And in the morning in the office, when he had seen a movie, he told about the movie. Not necessarily the way the movie played out, but the way he played out
the way he
in
saw
the
it.
Movie.
Right. Interesting. Fascinating.
So he was interesting in most thing, but also sort of, which all good architects are, also a reading of the world. Mm-hmm. Sort of what's going on out there. How do I read that relationship? Mm-hmm. How does a human behave in that particular thing? How does that person stare on me? How does everything comes into a play in which, in the end, make a deeper story towards that of understanding a form of social consciousness. Right. Which actually is his content.
In this building, we see what I would call board form concrete, rough form work, creating this really sort of haptic concrete that you can see the knots and the bubbles from the air and such like. And then we see Norway spruce, as I understand it, for the glulam beams, and we see glass. Maybe you could just talk briefly about Fehn's understanding and appreciation and importance he placed on materials.
It's more or less the same in all of his building. That vocabulary of material is sort of his vocabulary, right? It's three times. It's a material that has, and each material has a capacity to make a construction, and that construction has also a capacity to make an opening. So the opening in a brick wall or a concrete wall is different from the order of columns. The order of columns then is a maximum structure that can take in the maximum light. The concrete or the stone wall has its limitation, right? That is different from that. And so the opening, what is the opening? The opening is the capacity to take on light. And then what he says here is very clear. He said that this ruin means something. This ruin means something. This ruin has an opening. This ruin has a window, right? And I don't want to disturb that.
Rather, he celebrates it by putting a layer of glass on the outside of the facade, giving sort of further meaning to that philosophy.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one other architect that you've mentioned that you've been in contact with, and how influential this building was, and that's Ando.
Yes.
Talking about light materials, there's no other architect that probably is so fascinated with light and materials than Ando. Maybe you could just talk briefly about that.
Yes. Ando was here to meet Sverre and
they met each other and spoke. Wow.
Yeah, yes. He was in Oslo for a week or something like that, and we spoke and we looked at Fehn's work, and he was very interested in the work, and it's very clearly that it inspired him.
What year would that have been, roughly?
1990, something like that, I think.
And he wasn't as famous probably then as he is now.
No, he was not as famous as he is now, because during the years afterwards, he sent me all the material. He sent me his last books and his last photographs of
his work?
Of his work, which was, of course, very generous. And that lasted for a little time, which I very much appreciated.
I'm sure you did. That's a true honor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sverre Fehn was in contact with all these, let's call it for a moment, young architects at that time that came out of Cooper Union, that came out of Columbia. And they saw his work very early and really sort of studied his work. So he have always had good contact with young architects, per se.
Well, that's fascinating and following. So the museum is now complete, a successful intervention. It hasn't changed much since then. It's a museum that probably defines a country in a way that I can't think of many buildings do. It's a museum that defines a certain architectural philosophy. How do you see the museum in the future?
I think it's important that they will get a new museum building. Right,
and that's occurring next door.
Yeah, next door.
Which is not just a museum; it's a
administration.
Store.
All the things that they feel that this building is lacking.
A support facility, is that?
And yes, and also having the possibility to make their own exhibitions of other objects that is not displayed here, and can then maybe be displayed in their own way.
Yeah,
I think that is very important because it's puts less pressure on what is here, and less pressure on trying to change something that in its principle is unchangeable. Mm-hmm. So in relation to past and present, I think the duality between these two now museums, to put it that way, I think that can work very well for the future of also this building. Yeah.
It seems like Fehn almost decided this is, in some ways, we read it like this is it, there doesn't need to be any intervention. But do you think he would welcome intervention? Like if Ando did something here as an extra new narrative, do you think there's space for that? Or would you say, this is kind of it, guys, it's set as a perfect intervention into a historic medieval fabric. Let's just preserve it as is.
I think it's a difficult but very, very important question. And I think I'm precise in answering it in a way that I don't think he would have mind change. But the change has to be up to that intensity, have to be up to that architectural, if I may say, quality or architectural presence that exists here. It's just like his Venice pavilion. If there is a bad art object, the space neglected it. And I think it's very clear also here, if the things that are taken in does not have the capacity to have the dialogue with the precision that is already there, it will die very fast. So it's not just to invent something, but in relation to Kahn's what, why, and how. What is it truly that you're working with? What is it that you want to perform? What is it that you would like to give to the world, to put it that way? And in this sense, Sverre Fehn had the ability to give this. Within the mind, and it goes back to your question, that Noah handled this work over. It's his sentence. Noah handled this work over to the next one who's going to be working here. So it's not static in the way that, no, I'm the only architect in the world.
It's got to live and continue to live.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And the same with everything that comes into it. It has to find its present.
So Per, can you just tell us your understanding of how significant this building is within the canon of 20th century modernism?
Significant seems to be a strange word today because nothing really seems significant any longer. But, and in that also this house or this museum is part of that world in a constant transformation that goes faster and faster. And that the human being changes along with that, right? What place can offer is sort of embedded in its own, and let's use the word temperament or silence. You can't escape it when you first are in here. You might be confused. You might not understand what's going on. You might also search for something that you will not find. But in that, and if you stay here for a certain period of time, you will gradually sense that the energy of the space has something to give you. That is not whether it's a nice window. It's not whether it's a nice column or that the column sits right. It's deeper than that. It is that the uniqueness of architecture, at its best, can put you in a position to think or put you in a position to reflect of your own life and the life of the others inside of that. And then it's not enough to look at the pictures. Then it's not enough to, I know there is a good building somewhere. You simply have to be there. And this is a building that you simply have to be there.
Indeed you do. Indeed you do. The latter part of his career, he won the Pritzker Prize. Did he ever speak to you or any of your colleagues about what that actually meant for him?
Oh, I think he was very proud. There was only one man in the office, Henrik Hille at the time. And Henrik is saying that he's coming out of the office door and telling this. And he was very moved by it. And there are many stories that goes along with it. They were to see some of the buildings in the west of Norway. And they ask, are we coming with our jet, or do you take your own, right? And that's a story that's sort of...
How did he respond to that?
Always will be in the office, to put it that way. And they call we're at the celebration at Guggenheim, and of course it was a huge story for all of us. And we had a party.
So you were at the Guggenheim?
Right.
Oh,
yes.
What an honor.
Yeah, no, it was an honor. And Guggenheim was not completely finished at that time, so It was a little bit of a building site with this large table then arranged out, and quite memorable.
Quite special
story.
indeed.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that. Wow. Well, I think at that juncture we can say thank you again so much, Per Olaf, for your time and reflection and insight. It's been truly fascinating listening to you and walking around here today with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your interest, and thank you for coming. Thank you very much.